30 special planning commission meeting. And just as a public service announcement, members of the public who may wish to speak on the public forum this evening, you are welcome to sign in to join under the public comment. And the instructions are on tonight's agenda, and please follow the instructions to the T. And calling the meeting to order. And next agenda item here is roll call. And Commission Secretary, would you please poll the commissioners, please?
Yes, Chair. Good evening, everyone. I'll now take attendance. Commissioner Albana.
Here.
Commissioner Alcorn.
Here.
Commissioner Belong.
Here.
Vice Chair Chuan.
Here.
Commissioner Ciardella.
Present.
Commissioner Galong. And Chair Tao.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next agenda item here is public forum. And those interested are invited to address Planning Commission on any subject not on tonight's agenda, orally via Zoom webinar, instructions above. Speakers may provide their name and city of residence for the recording secretary's record. And the comments may be limited to 3 minutes or less. As an item not listed on the agenda, no response is required from the city staff or the Planning Commission, and no action can be taken. Planning Commission may instruct the staff to place the item on a future meeting agenda. So, Ms. Medina, do we have any public comments?
Chair, at this time, we do not have anybody in the queue for public comment.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Medina. And we're moving on to new business. And this is the presentation for the Milpitas Metro Specific Plan Area. So, Director, if you will.
Chair, just do we need to close the public forum?
No, there's no requirement to do.
Okay, all right, no problem.
Thank you, Chair Tao, members of the Commission. We're pleased to be here tonight with you. We have our consultants for the Metro Plan. This is the task update. You are probably aware we've been working on an update to the transit area plan since last year. And since January, February, March, we had 3 workshops with the City Council on various policy questions. So that information has been condensed into a very long, a very good presentation by our consultants tonight for the Planning Commission. We thought at this juncture, as the plan is being prepared, that it would be a good time to check in with the Planning Commission and let you know what kind of direction we've been receiving from the City Council, and to receive any feedback that you may have. So we have our project manager, Kevin Riley, who's here tonight. Also, our 2 consultants, Jane Lynn from Urban Field Studio and Christina Paul from Metropolitan Planning Group. And because our time is short, I'll turn the time directly over to Jane for tonight's presentation. And we're all here, and also the planning manager, Jessica Garner, is here to answer any questions. Thank you.
So, Planning Director, if I can just interject here for 1 second. So we'll have the staff and consultant presentation, and then we'll probably go through a QA session. And if there's any public comments, we'll go ahead and entertain the public comments, and thereafter we will adjourn this meeting at 6:45.
Sounds great. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Lynn.
Thank you very much. Good evening, commissioners. It's really great to be here with you today. As Ned mentioned, we have condensed 3 presentations to the City Council into 1. So bear with us. There will be 3 parts, and we'll try to get through each part in about 15 minutes each. So, and when we have a pause, we'd love to hear if you have any clarifying questions, but we'll really be saving our discussion for the end. So, what we'll be doing today is really giving you an overview of what we've done so far for the Milpitas Metro specific plan, and talk about the main framework policies that are part of it, and these address land use and density, part 1. Part 2 is transportation planning framework, and then we'll talk about the public realm. Each 3 of these components are a really important piece of the framework policies that will go in the specific plan. And we'll talk about your reactions. So just to give you a sense of where we are, as Ned mentioned, it's been about a year, and what we've gone through is a lot of the initial background research and community engagement. And so that's been ongoing. Hope that you had participated or seen some of that along the way. As we started this year off, we had 3 meetings about the topics we'll discuss today, and here we are at the end of April. As we go on to our next steps, we will be doing a draft, and an administrative draft will come out pretty soon. And we will begin our EIR. And so the draft and EIR are expected to be ready by the end of the year. The Milpitas Metro specific plan is based on this vision, which has 7 components, but the biggest of all of them is to create a more complete neighborhood. We know that the TASP, the plan that preceded this, really addressed a huge transformation to a transit-oriented neighborhood. And there were great strides, and that was really made possible, but we're not quite all the way there yet. So to really complete the neighborhood is what this specific plan tries to address. And so we're talking about expanding the neighborhood of services and retail, and also talking about bringing jobs near transit as one of the parts of the vision, also providing affordable and market rate housing and better connections for walking and biking, and a greater variety of shared public spaces, which we will talk about today, and also to enhance the sense of place and identity for the metro area. So as we start, this is the first part, land uses and densities. This will just give you an overview of what we're envisioning here. The proposed land use changes, what's existing is on the left, and what we expect to happen is diagrammed on the right. And really we're addressing 5 really main areas. And from the TASP to now, we've expanded the plan area to include an innovation district and a part of the main street. And also this Milpitas Metro specific plan will really look at the Great Mall, and I'll go into that in just a moment. Also, there are a couple areas that have yet to be developed to the vision that the task was in what we're calling the Tango subdistrict. That's the Tarab and Sango Court area. And so we just mashed it together and called it Tango. Sounds much more fun. And then the Heret Court, which is a part of the McCandless subdistrict. So we'll walk through each of these, Christine and I will. So we'll start with the Great Mall. And the Great Mall, we had some really great conversations with Simon Properties in fact, over the last year. And we've really tried to keep them involved along the way. What we're really envisioning for this is not necessarily to change everything, but also just to address what's possible. And so this just gives you an idea that the sub-district is over 150 acres, and Great Mall is probably 99 acres. And then VTA owns a portion of the frontage on Great Mall Parkway, and all of the parcels actually at the edges of the sub-district, the ones that you can see from Great Mall Parkway and Montague Expressway, are owned by different entities other than Simon. So when we talk about Great Mall, it's really important to think that it's not just one landowner there. So this is a little comparison of what was in the TASP. So what was in the TASP in the last plan really didn't address this area. It really allowed the zoning to stay the same, and it didn't really envision much for this site. And so this is an opportunity right now. There's residential is not allowed in that sub-district, so that's something to consider for this update. And then also the FARs, the development is really quite low and limited to a low density. So it's time to change that so that there's capacity for something to evolve over the next 20 years like we expect. And Simon Properties is doing all sorts of really great things in terms of mixed use development in other parts of the country and nearby. And so we're really excited to see what they might consider as the shopping center evolves. And we see in other places that they really have activated it with a mix of uses, both office and residential, with their retail. We can see something really incredible happening here too. So just to give you a sense, we kind of thought, well, what could happen over the next 20 years? We can imagine that they could develop on their surface parking lots. That seems like one possibility. And then we really thought that perhaps they might think of any portion, not necessarily this portion of the Great Mall, to be redeveloped. And so, you know, I think that's possible as the size of retail might change, or if they consider something different. And then also just, you know, there could be something entirely different. This last diagram doesn't mean that everything would be wiped off and changed. This is just to say that there's something else that could happen here, which perhaps we should be anticipating. When we look at the scale of the site, it's hard to grasp. So what we did was we just cut and paste at the right scale what, say, Santana Row would look like here. And it, as you can see, this is a big site. And so how to work with it and how to imagine what could go here is, it's a pretty big scale, and it would mean a big significant destination, which, you know, Great Mall already is a great destination. This would just make it even more vibrant and mixed. And I think that would be a really great benefit to this area. So here's one more really fun one where we look at how Bay Street and Emeryville could also, is a little bit smaller than Santana Row, but just kind of seeing how that, if that was just cut and paste here, how much space that would take. And it really gives you pause to see how big the scale of this sub-district is. So we had sort of 4 things that we thought would be really important as part of our policy framework for this. And the number one thing, because we're so close to the Milpitas Transit Center and Bart Station and VTA bus station, that it really needs to be walkable. And so anything that happens on the site should reimagine those surface parking lots and make a walkable street network be part of that vision for the future, make it a lot nicer to be there and more dense in general. The other thing was to imagine how these spaces connect and add to our public life, and a central gathering space somewhere in this sub-district would be really important to be a destination for activities. And also we really see that the amenities now are a real anchor for retail and mixed use spaces. So it's a really great center that we're hoping to get a little bit with the district, but could build off of as well in this area. So having one of those would be great. And then also really, this is a diagram, we started to model it. This is by no means what we expect to happen. It's just sort of a test to see how it might go. But just to imagine that there are a lot of active uses, especially along Great Mall Parkway and within the sub-district, just to make sure that we have a wide variety of things happening. And we can imagine, you know, office above or residential above in some of these more urban buildings. And also just to really think about where scale is really appropriate in the city of Milpitas. And I think here, the 2 circles that are here are the transit centers. So there's light rail at both of these nodes, and there's this great opportunity along Great Mall Parkway to anticipate an urban scale and really have more density here where it's appropriate. This is going to be unique compared to other parts of Milpitas. So we were testing, so you get a sense of, like, we just needed to know how much could fit here. And so some of our tests revealed, you know, this level of development. And so we were playing around with this, and Christina will get into this in a little bit, of how much this entire district could, what the capacity of this entire district could be. But we really see that retail, office, housing, and the hotel, there's an existing hotel. So all of that being part of the mix. And so really to expand, there is retail there. The new retail that we would like to encourage is more neighborhood serving, as well as that regional serving retail, which is really wonderful, so that we see them as a real complement to each other. And then we got to imagining what that could be. And this is a rendering of, one of those imaginations of how this is at Great Mall Parkway at the entrance into the Great Mall at McCandless, and how this could really transform and be a lot more urban and dense and vibrant and have the activity that you would expect would be near to transit stations, light rail stations, and be an urban center and an attraction for this part of the region. And as we were imagining, we'll talk about this a little bit more in a minute too, what might happen on Great Mall Parkway, that this would be just also an opportunity to be a place where people can gather, recreate, walk, take a walk, and also get to the transit and back, and also to their homes, and really be a really nice place for and a place that we can all identify as the metro neighborhood in Milpitas. So I'm going to pause here and turn it over to Christina. So Christina, would you go over some of the other parts of our plan?
Yeah, certainly. And good evening, Chair and Commission members. It's really lovely to be here with you. And we know that we're going through quite a bit of content tonight. So Jane mentioned this, but we've broken this out to sections. So if you have any questions after each, we'll certainly help to answer those. And then we're going to have a fuller discussion at the end. I'm going to go through the proposed land uses. And essentially, these are the land uses that we are proposing to change in each of the districts in Milpitas metro area. So one of the things that is actually a fairly important change between the transit area specific plan, the current task, and Milpitas metro is that we've expanded the boundaries of the plan area. And one of the most important reasons for that is to include this innovation district, which is between the BART station and the highway. And this is where you've likely heard as part of the general plan process, the city has been planning an innovation district, R&D, and et cetera, et cetera. And so we are working to make that real and to facilitate that changeover to those land uses by drawing a direct connection between that district and the BART station across Berryessa Creek. So you can see here in white the dashed proposed roadways. The blue is that innovation district use where we wouldn't be allowing any residential uses. The purple is fairly high density mixed use. And then you can see the BART station with the asterisk on it. Next slide, please. So this is a model of what this could potentially look like. This is really an extrapolation of what was happening as part of the general plan process. So we're seeing an FAR of 2.5, which gets us quite a bit of space. It would get us 2.5 million square feet of office, light industrial R&D in the innovation district. We're working to encourage this to be an office campus-like setting, potentially with hotel capacity. It has excellent transportation access off the freeway and transit access off of BART as well, and it's close to the Great Mall. So one of the key points here is that throughout the Milpitas metro plan area, we're working really to come to knit everything together so that we are creating that cohesive and complete community, which is a little bit lacking. There's a lot of housing development, which is really exciting. And so now it's time to knit that together with the sense of place glue. Next slide, please. This is a visualization of what the innovation district could look like. Right now, we're looking down the what would be the extension of Milpitas Extension. So if you go towards the highway from BART, you can see BART down in the distance. Jane's gesturing to it. And this would be Milpitas Extension going over Berryessa Creek. And we are going to be working on design guidelines to make sure that this feels like an innovative district. Go ahead. Thank you, Jane. While we get closer to the BART station, and I do want to underscore that while we have a lot of content here and we are working on drafting the plan, this thing is not baked. And so we really do value your input. And in fact, as the conversation with the city staff and other decision makers evolves, we're thinking about, are these really the right land uses, et cetera, et cetera. This particular rendering shows residential development on the current bus depot. So it would be decked over, and then also on the VTA parking lot. So this would be a longer term potential development. They are already allowed to do residential development here, and we would encourage mixed use so that there would be some opportunity for commercial development here. But you can see that if this were to develop as residential, we could fit around 1,000 dwelling units around the BART station. All right, looking down into Tango, these are neighborhoods that have really been developing with townhomes since the TASP was established. And we're proposing that now where you see this so far undeveloped site, which is somewhat now, some of the parcels have been bought by the city actually to become park as defined in the last TASP. And you also have the Milpitas Boulevard extension coming across Great Mall Parkway. So this is much more transit accessible than this neighborhood has been in the past. And so what we're doing is we're proposing a slightly higher rate of development. So you'd see approximately a 5-story podium building there instead of townhomes. We are planning, you can see the street network here. There's going to be some parks in the center of TASP, into the center of the Tango neighborhood. We have the Rathbone Park, which we'll be adding to the Milpitas Boulevard extension, which will have some park parcels on either side. And then in fact, Jane, if you could gesture to the parcel just south of the one that I indicated, the one with the diagonal building, yeah, right there. This parcel was actually one that was identified as park space in the TASP and is identified with park space in its current land use. And that's something that we're moving over to as we work to adjust the plan. I do want to highlight again, we're working on these pedestrian connections. We're working to make sure that the creeks throughout the district are assets and are fully accessible and amenities to the whole city and neighborhoods. Thinking about Tango here, again, when we start to look at the kinds of development that we have been seeing in the TASP or metro area, and we look at these 5 to 7-story podium buildings, like I think you can see some in behind me here, we could fit around 1,300 apartments into the as yet unredeveloped parcels in the Tango district. And again, we're working to connect this throughout. Heret Court, the story is fairly similar, where we're going to be promoting podium buildings rather than townhomes. And in this Heret Court area where we have in fact had some conversations with landowners and developers who are interested in redevelopment, we could fit around 700 apartment buildings. And this again is really conceptual to figure out what the capacity is. We don't necessarily think that all of this will happen. It certainly won't happen all at once, but this is what we could fit in here. Thinking about Main Street, we already have some significant buildings coming along on Main Street. It seems like it's more and more appealing to developers. And here we would be permitting even taller land uses of similar densities than the ones that are being proposed now. And Jane, I don't know if you have those densities on the top of your head, but we could fit around 500 units on Main Street in the parcels that we've modeled. And one important thing to note on Main Street is that this again is an expansion area for the TASP boundary. And it's important because some of these parcels are city owned. And so there's a much more significant opportunity for affordable housing development there than on other parcels.
Ms. Paul, just want to clarify this, the Main Street that you're speaking of is not within the current Midtown boundaries, is that correct?
It is in the current Midtown boundaries, and so we would be shifting that boundary as part of this planning process. And
so the TASP Metro is expanding into the Midtown, and Midtown is taking a back seat in that respect, with a shrunk up footprint?
Actually, and I'm sure that Ned would love to jump in on this, but actually looking at the proposal for the Gateway Midtown project that the city is planning, it's essentially that the Main Street Midtown Gateway area is actually expanding around that core. And this part is sort of a long tail, and so it's being trimmed, but I think that planning area overall is being expanded.
Yeah, I would just through the chair, I would just add that back in 2018, you may remember that the core project came forward. It's just north of the parcels that we're looking at here. Yeah, thank you. And a portion of that site was in the task at the time, and a portion was not, was in the Midtown plan. And as part of the entitlements for that project, we put the entire parcel, project parcels into the task. So there is a precedent for that. And these last few parcels are primarily city owned, and we look at it as an opportunity for additional, as Christina mentioned, for additional parkland as well as for additional affordable housing sites. Where this diagram shows Main Street and it pokes over just south of there, the Senior Lifestyles just finished a very nice affordable senior housing project. Phase 2 will begin soon. We'll begin processing that soon. So there's changes all up and down along this particular portion of South Main Street.
By designating them into the task metro area, they're also going to be subject to the pro rata share of the infrastructure cost.
That's correct.
Okay, and the stakeholders have no objections to that?
Again, most of the parcels are owned by the city, so we don't have, we will be selling them to a developer of some sort. And
we won't.
I think that's one of the reasons that we would like to bring them into the task, is that will these are some larger remaining parcels for development, and that will generate additional revenue through the impact fees for the infrastructure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question. So when we look at the development capacity, this is a little bit of a complex table, but you can see the really incredible, between column 1 and column 2, the incredible development that happened after the task. There were 7,000 units planned. The city got 95% of those units and then decided to update the plan, which is the process that we're going through now. And so you can see that many of those were entitled in column 4. We are projecting a similar number of unit capacity as part of the metro plan. You can also see that in a couple of, so essentially the story is that with the residential in the first row, the city saw a lot of that development that was desired. In office space, not quite as much was actually built. So you can see that 900,000 was projected and we only got 10,000. I think that this has changed significantly as the newer projects come online along Great Mall Parkway. But what the story was that this told us is that we really want to make sure to emphasize these neighborhoods serving retail spaces, office spaces, et cetera, that didn't come to fruition as part of the task development. And then also add some small additional capacity in each of those areas, and then some significant additional residential capacity. And one of the reasons for this is that, we are talking about some development on the Great Mall site. Simon has expressed interest in developing residential units on the Great Mall site and came to the city about 1.5 years ago to begin that discussion. Things have changed a little bit since COVID, but the fundamental precepts are the same. And also the city is looking at fairly significant regional housing needs allocation through will be part of the upcoming housing element. And so it will be helpful to the city to have this capacity available for future affordable housing. Next slide, please. So we wanted to share with you the feedback that we got from City Council. We asked them whether or not they supported the land use policies as described, if they supported the locations for the land use as described, and whether or not the densities were appropriate. The overarching feedback that we got from council is that the metro district is a metro district. It's very different from much of the rest of Milpitas. So while we want to create a complete neighborhood here and a mix, it's also appropriate to have denser development than we would expect or propose elsewhere in the city. Next slide, please.
Okay, so we're about to start our next one. I just want to pause for a second for clarifying questions. We're going to, again, save the discussion questions for the end, but
So Ms. Lynn, Chair has a question. So we've used the metro and the transit area specific plan sort of interchangeably. And is there a sort of a going to metro as the formal moniker at some point?
Yes, that was a great question. Yes, we're renaming and rebranding and rewriting. This is a new specific plan. It is no longer the TASP update. It is a new Milpitas Metro specific plan. But we will be building off of what was there before, because there was significant, it was a great plan to start with.
Sure. And so the Planning Commission has adopted a ad hoc subcommittee that's related to this particular land use areas. So going forward, will we be able to integrate the subcommittee members more into the whole planning process on a sort of more organic sort of kind of discussion basis, and kind of keep them updated so that we can do the regular update? Is there a mechanism for that?
I believe there is, but I would look to Ned also to help answer this question a little bit more. We absolutely aren't done yet, so there will be more opportunity. Yeah. Okay, well, we may come back to that because I think, yes, we're not done. So yes, there is. That's just the answer to that. So I'm gonna, is there another question?
Larry, Commissioner Ciardella.
Yeah, I forgot. You can call me Larry. It's okay. You know, when the Great Mall was originally approved, there were 27 individual lots around the old Ford plant. Are those still there? I know Home Depot's got one, and a few of the other businesses that are over there, but are there still, several lots left?
All of the edge parcels are not owned by Simon, but the number of ownerships is not as many as 27. So there's been consolidation over the years. So yes, there are still some lots that are not part of the Great Mall, but separate. And so this plan would address that too.
Are they owned by the Ford Motor Land Company?
Oh, no, I didn't see
Oh,
the
okay.
Ford Motor Land Company as an owner.
Okay. And how many are there? Do you know?
I believe it's something like 8 to 10.
Yeah, that's correct. And the Great Mall itself is one large parcel. Simon actually
Okay.
does own a couple of small parking lots that abut Great Mall Parkway. But there's also a much more significant VTA parking lot. There's Home Depot, and then there's the school, an industrial building, and a couple of hotels.
Okay,
Okay.
and I'm sorry, Commissioner Ciardella.
Yeah, that answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. And a question for Ms. Lynn and Ms. Paul. The Great Mall concept here, is it developed and shared with the Simon Properties, and they are generally on board with the concept?
Yes, we've talked to them 4 times and shown them these ideas, and we have had conversations about them. It doesn't mean that they have committed to anything, and we absolutely are just putting ideas out for their so that they can see and be a part of this process, and the evolving of their property is on their own timing. So
Absolutely. Just want to kind of have a little bit more buy-in in the process. If there's we hit any hitches, we want to get them early. In terms of the innovation district side there, the expanded boundary areas. So this question is for both Ms. Lynn and Director Thomas. So that will also be brought into the the infrastructure cost calculation arena, I assume.
Or the Great Mall site?
The innovation district of the sub-district of the areas, then the expanded portion.
Yeah, Jane, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that we're developing the plan now based on the policy direction from the council. And then once the draft plan is blessed, so to speak, then we will devise, or we'll come up with the new, it's called the basic infrastructure plan. And that infrastructure plan identifies all of the big ticket infrastructure items that that need to be built within the area. And then it's actually, right now, it's a fairly simple process. We then calculate all the number of units that are calculated or expected to be developed, and we divide one by the other, and we come up with a per unit cost. Right now, that per unit cost in the task area is a little over $40,000. We don't know what the new impact fee will be. It really depends on how many infrastructure items we put into the new basic plan, and then how many units we expect to be built over the next 20 years of the time horizon of the current plan.
And those commercial properties in the innovation district could also be eligible to need to pay into the TADF, the fees that are particular to this plan area. And after this, after this plan is complete and the BIP is complete, the city is expecting to update the TADF also to make sure that it fits the new plan.
Okay, and then one last question here, with regards to hospitality, designations. Milpitas has gained quite a few 3-4 star, sort of not full service hospitality uses. At what point are we hitting the magical top end of the market needs?
That's an excellent question. That's not one that we have in this presentation right now, but we are planning to do a special economic analysis, kind of what are the real opportunities in the Milpitas Metro District to council in a couple of months. And so we'll make sure that we reach out and let you know that that's happening.
Thank you very much. Apologize for my questions there. Please go ahead.
That is actually the most, that's the most complicated portion. So I think these two next sections, now that we have gone over sort of the basics of the plan, will probably go a little bit faster. So this transportation planning section, as you know, there are a number of routes that kind of go through, connect this area with the region, but also there are some elements of it that really disconnect this neighborhood from itself. And as we kind of go through, we see that, these big streets, rail, and the creek, they kind of cut up the way that you would walk around the whole neighborhood. So the kinds of transportation planning we're talking about is really to increase the ability for people to walk and bike and get across a lot of these barriers. And so there's a couple really important things to point out. One, we'll talk about this idea of reimagining what the Great Mall Parkway could be, and then also talking about completing a bridge over South Penitentiary Creek into Tango. There's another pedestrian bridge that's planned for going over Montague right over here. And then there's yet another bridge to make all of this area a little bit more connected and closer in terms of walking time and distance. Right now you have to go around, which takes longer. So we're also considering a bridge that would really open up this whole area in the Innovation District as well. And of course, more recently in June, there was a new pedestrian crossing that broke ground and I believe is there. So the Great Mall Parkway right now, we thought this is a great opportunity. It has this overhead light rail that goes down the center. We see that there's a lot of new development that's perhaps already constructed. You probably see it coming out of the ground. But for what's not there, there's some renderings, and you can really see that there's a new vibrant street that's happening on that side. Now, on the Great Mall side, we really see that there's a lot of potential here, especially since it's such a wide street. And one of the things we thought about was the structure itself has an opportunity to be a lot more interesting than it is currently, and for it to become a landmark of some kind with public art or identification of some sort through lighting. There are a number of things that could make this feature, which is actually one of the only places where you really see overhead light rail in the region, and make it really something special. So that's one idea for Great Mall Parkway. The other is that it's quite wide and it has a lot of lanes, and the current infrastructure for bikes is not so great. So the way we would reimagine it, and this is not to say that this is the full proposal, this is just an idea how to remix, narrow the lanes, narrow the median, make more space for the bikes and for people, and a linear park of some kind. So really thinking about, that's a big right of way that is public land, and to reimagine the public realm there would be really fantastic. And so that's why this rendering really illustrates that, and we're trying to think about how we can increase the capacity of this road. And one of the big concerns is, what about the impact to traffic? And we're not taking away lanes, we're really just talking about narrowing them and remixing. So this is one of the ideas of how to sort of increase the identity and landmark nature of this street and make it a lot more attractive. We also looked at trails and sidewalks, and these are the existing trails and sidewalks, and you're thinking there's a lot of missing stuff here. So there was this quote by one of the city council members, and it said, trails should be interconnected like bicycle spokes to the neighborhoods, with places like Great Mall District and Bart as hub. And I think this was actually, I was like, yay, this is exactly what we want to do. We want to connect and make sure that it's easier to get across. There's a lot of missed connections that need to be filled in. And those connections go over creeks. They go over large streets like Montague Expressway and Great Mall Parkway. And we want to connect between districts as much as possible. So there's a lot of places where we need to bridge and connect. We also think of, there's opportunities for some streets, especially in Tango, for better connections as well. And, you know, when we think of streets, we typically think of only for cars, but we're really thinking that the design of the street would allow a mix, and the design of the street may also just be that it should be for pedestrians and bikes only. So as we were considering the new streets for this area, there was that consideration. So this again just points out the existing streets and connections. And what we'll look at here is there's a big gap in Tango. And so as we want to close in, we start to fill it in. And actually here's a better drawing, and you can see Bart is right here, and we're just trying to connect across the water and right into this area, and really bring in some more new streets that, in this case, this segment would be pedestrian and bike only, and emergency vehicles. And then there would be the ability to drive here, and here, but that this would just limit things like cut through traffic, and also make it really a lot safer for pedestrians and cyclists and people to get to transit. And again, you saw this before, but just to give you a sense, so here's that pedestrian bridge that we're thinking about, and you know how close it can be. This would just be 1 block away from the Milpitas Transit Center. And so I'm going to hand this back to Christina to go over some of the goals and priorities and how this fits in with the general plan.
Yes, so we have been working closely with the folks in the planning department who have been leading the general plan update and making sure that we're working to implement the general plan to essentially make more detailed policies as part of this project to really further that direction. And one of the most important, as you can see here on the left, some of the most relevant policies that are related to the kind of work that Jane was talking about, really promoting complete streets, promoting multimodal transportation, sustainability, transportation demand management, et cetera. And we've also conducted a couple of surveys. We conducted a public survey where we got over 300 responses, and then had a public open house and follow-up asynchronous online open house that people could participate in. And we really heard from the community that it is a higher priority for them in this neighborhood to have those pedestrian and bicycle connections over vehicular traffic speed and ease of access. As Jane mentioned, on the major arterials, we're not planning on reducing any lanes or anything like that, but we're working to make those streets work better for all kinds of users. Next slide, please. Here are some more survey results. Folks were asking for the top 3 here are continuous walking trails, bike lanes that are separated from automobile traffic. So for example, on Great Mall Parkway, there's like a 6-foot bike lane, which is right next to 3 very fast moving lanes of traffic. So it makes people feel a lot safer if there's more of a buffer there, and then better lighting at night, crosswalks, etc. And so these are what we're really taking to heart and trying to implement as part of this plan. When we asked folks how they wanted to access the transit station, they said that they wanted safer pedestrian access, safer bicycle access, and better connections between transit systems. We also asked them how they got around the neighborhood, and that's what you can see on the right. And really very few folks were concerned about parking. Only 20% were concerned about parking at the station or quicker car access. So when we think about this kind of transportation approach, we think about transportation equity. So how can we really provide not only for all kinds of users, bicyclists and pedestrians, et cetera, but how can we think about it a little bit more globally? How can we make sure that kids feel safe or parents feel safe getting their kids to school on bikes? Are there other considerations that we need to take into account? And so these are the things we've been thinking about during the planning process. And so we have developed policies focused on each of these different transportation-oriented topics: walking, biking, driving, parking, and riding transit, and working to make sure that we have a complete network where folks do have a lot of choice and it's really comfortable to make the more sustainable choices of walking and biking and riding transit. This is an illustration. I'm sure you're familiar with this concept of how many folks can you get through on a bus versus bike versus cars? And you can see that buses and bikes really take up dramatically less space than do cars. And so this is one of the things that we're thinking about promoting as we densify this neighborhood and think about car storage over, really encouraging folks who might live nearby to choose transit. Next slide, please. One of the things that we are trying to encourage through the kinds of connections that we're talking about across the creeks, et cetera, is to increase the walk shed around the BART station as much as possible. You can see this come to life in the Tango area, where if we do have that connection between the BART station and across the Great Mall Parkway, then you can see how much that walk shed really increases. And that really encourages folks to get on transit. And that walk shed or access shed actually changes with each of the different uses, which you can see in the access sheds above. So folks are willing to walk about a half a mile, but they're willing to bike about 3 miles. And so that's something that we're considering as well. We are also considering level of service. So this is how we previously, before a couple of years ago, calculated the environmental impact of particular projects. Would it make traffic worse? This is something that we're actually still modeling just to check in with it. It's not a CEQA requirement anymore. So we are switching over in terms of CEQA to vehicular miles traveled. Are we really going to be producing many more folks who are going to be driving, or can we manage that? And then we're also, because we do have these major arterials and these are important streets for getting through town, we are looking at LOS as well. We also are lucky enough to have W-Trans as part of our team. They worked on the general plan, and they have really great experience in transportation demand management. What that means is, how do we encourage, and again, we're not taking anybody's choices away, but how do we encourage folks who live closer to transit to use their feet, to use a bicycle, to use transit, to use shared mobility, etc. And so we're developing a transportation demand management strategy and policies for Milpitas Metro. And hopefully the city can continue to use those approaches as other planning areas come up, like Gateway / Main Street / Midtown. This is a menu of potential transportation demand management strategies that we're going to be refining for Metro. They include transit passes. So if you live in a building, you automatically get a pass, or if you work somewhere, you automatically get a pass. Also ride sharing, bike sharing, telecommuting, guaranteed rides home, parking management, like unbundled parking, where you don't necessarily have a unit assigned, a parking space assigned to your residential unit. And cashing folks out of parking. So you can actually, in some cases, pay people to take transit. Next slide, please. When we think about parking, we think about all different kinds of parking. So we think about bike parking as well as many different kinds of vehicular parking, and also parking ratios. So how many parking spaces do we require that developers install as part of a project, or also we can set parking maximums. So you may not have more than whatever the number is, 2 spaces per unit or something along those lines. So those are policies that we're working on developing right now as well. We want to make sure that this is cost effective, ensures equitable access, effectively reduces transmission or emissions, and then again, does permit choices. Next slide, please. When we think about complete streets, we think about how, again, all different kinds of users can use a street. And these are some of the most important elements of a complete street. We're excited to work on promoting activity at the ground floor. How can we have cafes, etc., or shops such that it feels comfortable to be working on on Great Mall Parkway, or having a coffee out there? The wider protected sidewalks are one of the ways that we can do that. Protected bike lanes. So you can see here that the bike lanes are buffered from the cars by trees and parking. This is an example. This is not our street section that we're going to be using. But then we also have trees and landscaping to make it feel warmer, to make it feel more humane, etc. And right now we're actually working on our typical street sections. So this is some of our evolving work. And you can see this come to life in our simulation of Great Mall Parkway, where we do have the same essential traffic capacity. We're getting a lot of capacity out of the streetway by narrowing the median. It's about 40 feet wide under the VTA tracks, which is really unused space. We've spoken several times with VTA, and they're open to narrowing that space so that we could shift lanes in and then have a lot more usable open or public space, so bike lanes, open space, sidewalks, etc., on the sides.
Ms. Paul, just out of curiosity, while you were on the last slide, if I may just interject for a second, in terms of the land area, that's one question, and the other question is in terms of funding, do we have a sort of ways to fund this infrastructure changes for the intended reshifting of the travel ways?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. The part of our planning effort is to estimate the cost of all of this infrastructure that we're proposing, and to see if that would fit within the existing TATF, the existing fee structure, and if not, to provide recommendations to the city for adjusting it. We're actually not needing to suggest really significant infrastructure like major sewer updates or something like that. So this is some of the more expensive work that we are proposing, but it would be transformative to the character of the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead, please. Apologies.
No, it's great. So we also, again, we did 3 presentations to council, and we asked them a couple of questions about transportation. So here, and there are 2 slides of these. So here it's, do you support the Milpitas Metro policy to implementing the great plan priorities of focusing on multimodal transportation and et cetera? And the majority of council was supportive of that and supportive of closing the connections that we described. It's okay, Jane. Jane's keeping me honest with my timing. There's just so much to tell you. And then secondly, do these policies address concerns about impacts that may be associated essentially with traffic impacts that may be associated? So again, we're working on those parking ratios. We're working on transportation demand management. And council let us know that generally we're on the right track in their opinion. And we, of course, would love to hear your opinion, and suggested that we work on curbside management, wayfinding, which is something that I think that we're going to talk about a little bit more in the next section, safety and crime prevention, reducing emissions, and meeting those climate goals proactively. And again, welcoming all folks and making sure that people do have places to go, maximizing our spaces, including rooftops. And we're going to get to that in the next section also.
So I know I said we would pause, but I know that also we have to finish by 6:45. So I'm just going to keep rolling, and hopefully you'll hold your questions to the end. So this last part is about the public realm, and a lot of it has to do with, what are we offering in this area for more density, and what kind of spaces, because we really need to have something quite nice for a more dense place. And, when we talk about place, this is one way to think about all the elements that go into a really great place. We also are trying to talk to the idea of sense of place. And so sense of place is somewhat intangible, but to enhance the sense of place, there's quite a few things that you can do. And most of it has to do with standing out and being unique and memorable in the qualities of the place that you're trying to build. So some of our policies have to do with just spatial understanding as a sense of place, and wayfinding and signage and branding as well. And then also just having having policies that support places for gathering, interaction, and belonging. So already there's some strong elements to build off of with the Great Mall and the district. So having more parks and retail and entertainment and local businesses to continue with that will really make a place more vibrant. And then, of course, the sense of place in terms of memorability. There's so many ways that this can be achieved, and there's clues of what is really special about a place. And it could come through art. It could come through large features, especially through architectural expression. It can come through nice landscaping or something that's quite different or memorable. And so the connection to nature is also a part of this. So talk about architecture, but also trying to allude to open space. And with our framework policies, we really want to address this idea of sense of place and how the experience of how you go through this area, and really be mindful of what that can be. And so when and this alludes back to some of the community outreach we did, the kinds of places they wanted also included fun destinations. That was actually right up there with all the other stuff, and a variety of shared public spaces. And we really wanted to make this happen, although the current open space requirements for the citywide, actually, Christina will talk about this a little bit more, so I'm just going to save it for there. But we're going to talk about how those shared open spaces can be brought into our policies. And of course, safer streets, better connections. We've covered that quite a bit already. And this slide is really just to say that when we talk about open space, the definition of open space has a wide variety of things that meet that. And what goes on in a space and the amount of space it needs, this is a really important thing to remember, is that they're not always correlated. So, the kinds of what you can do can often happen in a really small space, and that the quality of that space and the quality of that design can really support lots of different kinds of uses and flexible uses as well. So these are the kinds of things we'd love to see And so as we go along, we're going to kind of think, what about scale and all of that? And we want to just remind you that when we're talking about our open spaces, that, even a place like Union Square is 3 acres. And I just want you to remember this because we're about to go into a discussion about how much open space we actually need. So, and this is just to cover also how Union Square is 3 acres. Mcguire Park within the district is 3 acres. And, there's Rathbone Park that's there now too is much smaller. The new McCandless Park is 4 acres. This just gives us a sense. The Bart Plaza is 1 acre. How much space do we need to make this a vibrant and livable place? Also, what needs to be there? A lot of times people are like, we want to play sports. We want to do something that is programmed like a more typical suburban park. And there are plenty of places within the city. There's a big network of places where these resources are available. This is a very, very tight and compact metro area. So we're really trying to say, well, what else can happen here? Because you can't put a huge ballpark here. It just won't fit. And so what are the other kinds of recreation that can happen? And those there's a wider variety than just sports that could be played here. So this is one thing that we want you to keep in mind. And at this point, I'll hand this over to Christina.
Thanks, Jane. So fortunately for this conversation, the city is in the process of developing its Parks and Rec master plan for the whole city. And so we've been really coordinating with the folks who are developing that both on the city side and then on the consultant side to make sure that we all have a universal approach. Since the beginning of this planning process, we've been having a conversation about parks and about the fact that as districts or neighborhoods urbanize, you tend to have a little bit less open space per person. It's more common in a suburban area to have big sprawling game fields and more common in an urban area to have more pocket parks. And how can we think about that? How can we essentially work on providing the same level of experience, the same level of value for recreation and open space access in a smaller space? And so that's one of the key things that we've been focusing on, and essentially how could we think about that? How could we help the Parks Department think about whether or not a proposed open space is acceptable, et cetera. If we look at the general plan currently sets a goal of 3.5 acres per 1,000 people, of 3.5 acres of parkland per 1,000 people outside of the TASP, and 2 acres I'm sorry, that's inside the TASP. Outside the TASP, it's 5 acres per 1,000. 2 acres of those should be publicly accessible park, and 1.5 of them can be on-site open space like roof decks, etc. Even with this ratio, it is very, very challenging to think that one might fit the number of required acres into the TASP. If you add up all of the required open space for the units that we've proposed and the units that were developed under the TASP, you would end up with about half of the Great Mall site, which maybe would be lovely, but would have significant impacts if Simon decided to turn that into parkland. That might sort of a little bit unlikely. So we're thinking about how how we can make the most of this. Next slide, please. So here you can see, if we just look at how many acres could be required using a round number of 2 people per unit, if we add up all the folks in TASP and Milpitas Metro, we would anticipate a demand of 52 acres. To date, there are 11.25 acres of parkland that have been developed, and we only have about 200 acres of estimated developable land looking forward. So again, we're thinking, how can we fit more into slightly smaller spaces? Next slide, please. That is something that we are working on determining, especially as that this would really be a citywide approach to addressing park needs and planning for future parks. So this is something we have a little bit of a pin on, but we have a close eye on as well. We, as we mentioned, will be addressing fees, and this will not be addressed at the next meeting of the Planning Commission. But as I mentioned, we will be bringing this to City Council. Will all of this fit into the existing fee structure? If not, what are the understood differences, and what might we see in terms of adjustment to the TADF? And we'll likely recommend updates there. These are the few questions that we asked of City Council around the public realm. Did they support the use of a different parks model, such as a parks level of service or recreational value system? And 3 out of 5 of them did. Others said, this is a really tough one because Milpitas is really known for its parks, and how could we potentially make more park space happen? And residents really want the highest level of service. Folks did sort of generally see the challenge in preserving a 3.5 acre of parkland to 1,000 person ratio in the metro area. And some folks said, I'd really like to make that happen, but it's something that we're going to have to come back and talk about again. Next, please. In general, folks agreed that it could be possible to supply some of the open space on site. And that could be communal in terms of being accessible only to folks who lived in a project, or accessible to the public in some cases as well. And then we looked at what we should think about in terms of sense of place, and council members said we should look at plants and pollinators. How do we support small businesses? Build parks with diversity in mind. What are people in the district really looking for? Make sure there are plenty of trees. In some cases, we have heard from the city staff that it's really challenging to maintain parks. So it may be preferable to keep publicly accessible spaces actually privately owned and maintained with the use agreement with the city. And they did support an in lieu fee for parks, so that if it's not possible to site parklands or recreational lands in Metro, that developers could pay the city and have that land situated elsewhere or developed elsewhere.
Oh my gosh, you made it to the end. So we did get through a lot of material in that time, and we really welcome your questions and comments. And really what we'd love to know from all of you planning commissioners is whether or not you think we're going in the right direction. This is a lot to take in, but even some comments about any of the points that we raised here today would be really helpful for us to go forward.
So I'll go ahead and make a decision. I'll just go ahead and go down the line with commissioners. If we have to elapse, a few minutes of the 6:45 stop time, I'll go ahead and do that, just so commissioners will have time to have questions. So if I go down to Vice Chair, any questions for staff and the consultants?
Just overall, thank you for the presentation. Very detailed. Overall, just at the high level view, it's really great job. I'm looking forward to seeing all this come to fruition there. So I guess my question is maybe just for you, just maybe get understanding in terms of, I realize there's a lot of data, but has there been maybe a particular area that you are having specific challenges around that you really maybe want our feedback, and maybe just some of your thoughts? You shared a lot, but is there maybe one or two areas that you'd like us to really comment on? Like I said, at a high level view, everything's great there.
Gosh, that's such a good question. I feel like we could talk about that for hours. And each of the areas has its own challenges. Like in Tango, it's around access. In the Montague area, I'm sorry, I'm getting the name. In the McCandless area, there's some challenges with property ownership, and there's like an industrial condo there with there's one building and 10 different owners, and so there's kind of an ownership challenge there. In the Great Mall Parkway, I can sort of go on and on. In the Great Mall, we have to think about like, how do we allow a reasonable amount of redevelopment? How do we think about where to site that? How do we kind of set that up for the housing element so that they can identify specific sites, not like this whole 99 acres. These are a few of the questions. Another is in the innovation district, you know, how do we make this as feasible as possible? Because from an economic standpoint right now, you know, we're not seeing a lot of demand for office.
Okay, all right. Yeah, no, I think just in terms of, you know, overall, it you know, overall looks, you know, I mean, just how I see it, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, just overall good, you know, different look and feel. You kind of see it now, just the way things are going there.
Okay, thank you, Vice Chair. We appreciate it. Let's try to move along here. Thank you for your comments, and Commissioner Alcorn.
Overall, just like the vice chair said, overall it looks great. I think it is definitely going in the right direction. We're on the right track here. I can tell you put a ton of work into this, and I can tell there's a ton more work to go. So looking forward to seeing it, you know, come to fruition. I've noticed that there's been an emphasis on like shared parking in some of the areas and stuff, which is really good. Really capturing that kind of downtown feel and vibe to it, and I think that's a step in the right direction. So great work. Keep us updated. Can't wait to see what comes next here.
Thank you, Commissioner Alcorn. Commissioner Belong.
So I have to agree with the last two commissioners. I think it's a great use of space, of unused space. And I'm just excited to see what it brings for in the future. And so great work. Thank you.
Thank you. And just for the reference, Commissioner Belong and Vice Chair Chuan are on the Planning Commission ad hoc subcommittee. So if you know, you're developing the new materials, you know, I think it'd be great if these two gentlemen can be shared and with some of the materials as the ad hoc committee moving forward. And Commissioner Cerradella.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions.
Please.
You know, there's a lot of our parks now that are very popular. I know Cardozo Park is people over there all the time. And I guess that's a question maybe for Ned. And then I've got another question for Ned too. There was once what would you call it? I call it a bubbler, where the water comes out of a little hole and the kids can run around and play in the water. Is that still scheduled for that park?
I wish that our parks director was here. I'll find out the answer.
That's what I was afraid
I
of.
know that there is an ongoing plan, and in the CIP, a lot of those things are programmed over time, and I'm going to say yes. If it was planned before, it probably is still there. But let me confirm with the Recreation Services Director.
Okay, and my next question for you, Ned, is, you know, they had talked about 3.5 acres of park per 1,000 dwelling units. What do we have now? I can't remember.
Yeah, it's still the same for the majority of the city in the new general plan as well. It's modified a little bit in the current task, and then that's one of the areas that we've been spending a lot of discussion time around for this metro plan because of all of the issues that Jane and Christina touched upon tonight. You know, we recognize, I think, Kevin, you might need to help me. There was a certain amount of acreage that, you know, if we held to that standard, it'd be a certain amount of acreage that would be required in the task area, and land is limited and it's very expensive there. So it's not likely that we will reach the full 3.5 per thousand there. And that's why we're looking for other solutions, creative solutions for that area. And one of those solutions is that the design of parks in the metro plan will look at the quality of the experience rather than the quantity or the acreage of experience. And that's kind of just a different way of looking at how we measure parkland. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to either Jane or Kevin.
Well, I'll just say that, you know, the original task anticipated something like 38 acres worth of open space for this number of housing units that we not quite gotten to, but close. And the availability of land just isn't there because much of what was approved was townhouse level development, which takes a lot of land. So we're behind the curve in terms of getting that, and a lot of the fees don't come in until later, so you can't get ahead of the game with fees to buy the land before developers get there. So now we are struggling with the reality that many plans have, and that is trying to catch up with open space compared to what the plan called for. So at the 11.25 acres that Christina pointed out, that we have to find a different way to do this and make sure that we bring equity to the residents of the area to get the kinds of services for parkland, sales, and other things that they kind of were promised. So the fees are there, they pay them, and we just need to come through with good plans to make it all work.
Great. Very nice presentation also.
Okay, thank you. And we're at 6:45 and we're still, Chair would like to go ahead and extend the meeting probably by 5 minutes to 6:50. So the remainder two commissioners will have a chance to ask their questions. Commissioner Albana, any questions?
No questions, but I'd like to say thank you very much to Ms. Christina and also Ms. Jane here, the staff of TASP. What I would say is I'm very happy that we're going in the right direction, and any support that our commission can do, it is so nice that, and I feel so good that I'm part of this generation to see how we can closely come into that ideal community in Milpitas. It is just wonderful to see this just coming up, but I know there's a lot of things more that has to be taken care of, but thank you so much, and we appreciate it. Yes.
Thank you, Commissioner Albana. Is Commissioner Galan with us or not? No? Okay, great. So anyways, the chair is just, I'll just use the last few minutes to ask a couple of questions. On the retail and the office square footage which is indicated, in the sort of re-envisioned metro plan, are those the metrics done prior to COVID or after COVID? Either Ms. Lynn or Ms. Paul, would comment on that.
Sure, I'll comment on so what we're talking about with the numbers that we're hoping to have actually is a 20-year time frame. And so what our assumptions are is based on the general plan and what's allowable rather than on market assumptions. We know that our market's not so great right now, and actually that is yet to be seen. It seems like it changes all the time. So we're definitely not using short-term information to make these sort of longer-term visions for what could be happening here. So I hope that helps answer the question. We're really looking further out.
Sure. And in terms of this iteration of planning, that the last task was done, probably that was a 2008, 2009 timeframe of planning. So is this on the 10-year horizon look, a 20-year horizon look? And then we have a sort of update at that point for the remainder portion to be built out?
Yes, we are planning on about a 20-year time horizon. The exact date is TBD and something we're going to talk about tomorrow. But in general, about 20 years, and certainly 2 housing element cycles, which are an important consideration. Those come up every 8 years. The next one is due in 2023. Okay, great.
And we certainly, as the planning body here at the city, we certainly look forward to having sort of may not be a one big presentation, but however sort of snippets of sort of the work products that as you develop, so that we can be apprised of it, and with the staff providing that to us will be greatly appreciated. And Mr. Riley, any additional comments you'd like to make?
I would only say that you guys have a great opportunity here. I think Milpitas is poised, to really take advantage of, what is out there, what this economy will bring. The arrival of Bart, is going to be huge. It will be a new path for Milpitas, and you've got a great location here. some 400 acres worth of land where you can really do something for the city of Milpitas. Really
Okay,
happy to be part of it.
thank you, Mr. Riley. And with that, we are about 4 minutes over our allotted time here. So I'd like to thank everyone, and would like to call in the meeting for adjournment at this point. So can I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
Oh,
Sure.
Chair,
Okay.
may I just say
Yes.
one thing really quickly? So we're currently scheduled to present a follow-up or have a follow-up discussion with the council in June. Jane, you'll have to, I think it's June the 15th that we're scheduled. That's a special meeting with the council. So I'll bring that up again with the council, with the commission as the date gets closer. But just so you know what our next steps are, Jane and Christina are working toward that date.
Thank you very much. And so I have a motion by Vice Chair. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, so we'll just go ahead, since we're short on time, we'll just go ahead, yay or no, yay or nay, yay?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, meeting's adjourned, and thank you very much, and we'll reconvene here at a regular meeting at 7
Thank you
o'clock.
very much.
Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.